Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you for your service. Thank you, Dennis T, for yours as well. And thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. My name is David Green. I am an alcoholic and an addict. I am grateful for a recovery date in Alcoholics Anonymous of August 8th, 1994. And I'm very grateful for a recovery date of October 1st, 2019 in Sexaholics Anonymous. Very grateful to be here tonight. Definitely grateful to be studying this chapter, We Agnostics. I had so many fixed ideas about all of this whenever I first came into the program in 94. I had a lot of trouble with the God idea growing up, mainly because of my experience and what had happened to me when I was young. When I went to jail, you know, those foxhole prayers, get me out of this, I won't do that anymore, save me from this, help me with that, show me, show me, show me, help me, help me, help me. It was all about me. And even coming into recovery, a lot of times I would say such prayers as, God, help me to be a better husband. That's not a bad prayer, right? I wouldn't think so. Help me to be a better friend. Help me to be a better boy. But what I keep seeing is I'm still praying for me. And, you know, our book is pretty clear that, you know, unless we're doing that to help somebody else, in which, you know, when you hear that, it sounds like that's obviously what I'm doing. But in my mind, a lot of the things that I was asking for was so that people would look at me differently. I would be respected. I would be accepted. It was all about me. And I just didn't realize any of this. So when we came to this chapter, We Agnostics, it was hard for me. For one, it's not that I didn't have a belief in God. It's just I believe, based on my experience in my past and the shameful, nasty, and dirty things that I'd always done, that he really wasn't going to help me. So I just had so many fixed ideas, and that was the key word. This chapter introduces us to faith. And faith, it's a belief. It's an assent of the mind to the truth. It just is. It's firm, and it's an earnest belief. That's all that faith is, according to the 1913 Webster Dictionary. And if you don't have one of those, I would encourage you to get it. You can download it pretty easily. I encourage anybody that I work with to get that, to take a look at the words, because they're somewhat different and today than they were in those days. So faith is an earnest belief, and faith is something that it turns out that we've had the entire time. And I didn't realize this for a long time, even being in the program, studying this chapter, teaching this book at different book studies, all of this stuff. I really never understood what this was talking about. Now, all the way through these chapters, we've been talking about fixed ideas. We've been talking about beliefs. We've been talking about concepts. We've been talking about ideas, prejudice, opinions. Well, come to find out, we have put our faith into those and really not even knowing it. So this becomes all new to me all of a sudden. When this book is talking about faith, at least what we're going to be looking at is talking that the faith that I have put in self without even knowing it. And it has made me very sick. It's not that I didn't have faith. It was just channeled in the wrong direction. And I didn't realize that was happening. I would pray to God, and then I would run off on my old ideas. I would live the day the way I wanted to. I'd come back and ask for forgiveness at night, go to bed. And after a while, I'd start getting into trouble. Things would begin to show up and appear in my life. I would try to handle them, asking God to keep me sober every day, thanking him at night, but not really realizing this entire time that self is the one that's guiding and directing my life, and I've put my faith there. That's almost scary after you've been around for a long, long time. I once took a pastor through this book, and it blew his mind. I mean, he had to really go back and look again at his present faith. And not that he didn't have belief and faith in God. I'm not saying that. It just turns out that we have more faith in ourselves, and we really don't even realize that. So let's take a look at the book tonight. We're going to be on page 51, and we'll start there in the middle of the page where it says, this world of ours has made more material progress in the last century than in all of the millenniums which went before. Almost everyone knows the reason. And I need to stop right there, and I need to ask myself this question. Do I know the reason? Why, if material progress was the same in those days, was equal to the best of today, why was it so slow? Why was it, as the book says, painfully slow? Well, it turns out that fear stops us from doing a lot of things. And they're going to give an example about that here in a minute. But anytime that I rely on reason, and I don't even really realize this, I realize that what I'm doing is I'm obeying that which is offered in an argument. Only I'm not the one that's arguing with it. It's pretty much arguing with me every time that I try to change my mind or I try to step out in a different kind of faith. It puts up an argument, a defense, and I don't have any defense against that. So it says, students of ancient history tell us that the intellect of the men in those days were equal to the best of the day. I believe that. I really do. Yet in ancient times, material progress was painfully slow. Any of us ever had any painfully slow growing in our recovery in our life? It says the spirit of modern scientific inquiry, research, and invention was almost unknown. It just wasn't heard of. But in the realm of the material, men's minds was fettered, and here's the key words, by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of, and definitely the key words, fixed ideas. Now, if I'm not careful, the experience that I've had through this process that has walked me a free man in many areas, if I'm not careful, my mind will be fettered and become superstitious, and all that tradition and fixed idea and all that stuff will come back in on me again. That's why it says it's easy to rest on our laurels. We're headed for trouble if we do. Alcohol is a subtle foe. So, fettered, what a word. Some of the contemporaries of Columbus, keyword right here, thought a round earth preposterous. They really thought that. They really believed that with all of their heart. They felt like if you sailed out to the end of it, you would go off and you would never return. In fact, some people had went out there and never came back. So they had that kind of supported their conclusion. We know today that that belief was a lie. And here was a man who stood on the seashore day after day after day and says, I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. I don't believe if you sail out there so far that you go off the end and you never come back. I don't believe the earth is round. I believe the earth is flat. And I believe that you can get east by going west. And he's standing here and everybody's telling him how stupid and how crazy he is. And he's saying, no, I don't believe this. But as long as he stood there and said that, he was very firm in his belief, but he had taken no action based on that belief. So therefore, it was just a belief. How many times have we done that? I believe God is love. I believe God is this. I believe God will work this out for me. I believe God will heal my loved one. He will do this. He'll do that. But I don't take any action to get better myself, and nothing gets better, in my eyes anyway. And all of a sudden, I'm fettered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas again. So we know that Columbus eventually talks the Queen into giving him money. This happened more than one time. He took a group of ships out. And at the first time, it wasn't a success. He come back. He talked her into doing it again. The next time he went out, it became a success. And it's been held for us Native Americans ever since. So he took action based on a belief, and he got results. That's the same thing that it's asking us to do here. Could it be that everything that I have believed up to this point about God hasn't really supported my recovery in a healthy way? Or even some of it? Could that be possible? Same as the people that thought that the earth was round rather than flat, and they flatly declared that and they believed that. Have I taken time through this chapter in the second step with a loving God and a sponsor to look at those ideas and to see if they support my recovery today or if that's something that needs to go? Now, my mind will tell me, no, don't do that. You can't change who God is. How dare you even try that? I agree with that. I can't change God. I can't change who God is. But I can change what my conception of God is. And when that changes, it seems like everything began to change. My old ideas did not work. The new ideas did. So that's given an example pretty much aimed at us. We ask ourselves this: are not some of us just as biased, that kind of relates to prejudice, and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as the ancients about the realm of the material? That's a place where I need to stop and ask myself that question as I'm coming through this work. Because if I don't do that, I just read on through these pages and I just run on to the end and say, okay, I've worked step 2, let's go on. But I really don't have an experience the way that I had whenever I came back through it this last time. So it says, even in the present century, American newspapers were afraid to print an account of the Wright brothers' first successful flight at Kitty Hawk. The reason why? Because had not all efforts at flight before failed? Think about that in our life. Anytime that we tried to fly in a different direction, a more healthy direction in our recovery, had not all efforts at that before failed? Why wouldn't they? My mind always drug me back to where I was at. And it always held me hostage. Always. Did not Professors Langley's flying machine go to the bottom of the Potomac River? And was it not true that the best mathematical minds had proved that man could never fly? They proved it. Was they wrong? I'll guarantee you they were wrong. I'll guarantee they were wrong. My brother Dennis T flew down here not too long ago, last year, I think, in fact, and he came to see me. So if they had proved that man could never fly, he wouldn't have made that trip. Could some of my beliefs that I'm holding about a loving God be the same way? Have I shaped them, molded them to the point to where I believe that even though I'm seeing proof of what's going on in your life, that it will never happen for me? How have I proved that man can never fly whenever it comes to God? Had not people said that God had reserved this privilege to the birds? Of course they did. Were they right? Of course they weren't. They were wrong. So that belief was wrong. And really that's what it's asking me. Have my beliefs been wrong? Have they been more grounded in me than they have in God? And I've used situations in my life in the name of God only to fail over and over and over. I used to really dog people in churches because I always felt that they tried to tell man how to live when they were living against it themselves. And really that was resentment and prejudice and judgment on my part. I didn't know any of that then. I know that now. I don't do that anymore. It doesn't matter. They're a brother, same as me. But the book says only 30 years later, the conquest of air was almost no story and airplane travel was in full swing. Yes, they were wrong. But in most fields, our generation has witnessed, key words here, complete liberation of our thinking. Is that what I'm looking for through this process? You want to get sober? I'll tell you how. Don't drink. You want to get sober from lust and acting out? Just don't lust and act out. Everything should be okay, right? If that's the problem should go away and there shouldn't be any more problem. But that's not the problem. The problem is my thoughts, my concepts, my beliefs, my ideas, my prejudice. And my book says here in most fields, our generation has witnessed complete liberation from that thinking. My God, I used to read that and think, man, I wish that would happen for me one day. Well, in order for my thinking to be liberated, to be free, I'm going to have to get rid of some of the ideas that I have. The book says, show any longshoresman a Sunday supplement describing a proposal to explore the moon by means of rocket. And he will say, I bet they do it. Maybe not so long either. I didn't even know what a longshoresman was. I read this book forever, just read right on through that. But come to find out, he's kind of like a roughneck, an Oklahoma guy, so to speak. But he works on a shipping dock, and he's just kind of rugged and closed-minded, And it says, show him a Sunday supplement. I didn't know what that was either. But it turns out that it's a newspaper. And it says, show him that, describing a proposal to explore the moons by means of a rocket. And you have to remember when this book was written, Man had not been to the moon yet. So for anybody to say that, I mean, you would look at them like, you're an idiot. I mean, there's never going to be a man walk on the moon. There just never will be. And we would believe that with all of our heart, most of us. And we would be wrong. So over and over and over, it's asking me here, could it be possible that my ideas, my beliefs have been wrong? Absolutely, they could have. It'd be almost like me seeing my brother Jason over here and saying, you know what, I'm going to get in my pickup out here after this meeting, and I'll be in San Diego in about 30 minutes, and we can sit down and have coffee together and read the book and talk. I mean, he would probably look at me like you're an idiot, and I would be, because there's no way that's possible. But do I believe it could ever happen? I'm not going to say no to that today, because it very much could. It just hasn't yet, and that's what happened there. Is not our age characterized by the ease with which we, keywords right here, discard old ideas for new? That's all we're trying to do through this process. If we can get rid of old ideas, if we can set aside the self, which has dominated us for so long through our ideas, our concepts, our beliefs, and our prejudice, we've seen it all the way through the book. In the chapter to more about alcoholism, we looked at it with the men of 30. We looked at it with Jim. We looked at it with the jaywalker. We looked at it with Fred. Old ideas. He believed, they believed, you know, the theory, this, that. And it always led these men to failure. And they ended up having an experience which changed their beliefs, and they walked a free man. And that's all we're doing here. So is not our age characterized by the ease with which we discard old ideas for new? By the complete readiness. And I think that's the key for me. Am I completely ready to throw away the theory or gadget which does not work for something new which does? I promise you, if this phone stopped working, if your computer crashed, you're going to be hustling and bustling to try to get it fixed. And we will do everything that we can to try to do that, because most of us can't live without that these days. But I promise you, if I can't get that fixed, I'm going to get a new one which works. I just will. Now, if I can do that with a theory or a gadget, why can't I do that with a belief? We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems. Anybody else have problems in their recovery, sobriety? I know we all do before we get here, but I mean, even after we're here. The same readiness to change our point of view. It's going to ask us some questions here, and this is called an exercise of the bedevilments. Now, I've asked my friend Ashley if she would put a template on the screen. Thank you. And if you guys are able to zone in on that, anytime I take somebody through this work, this is the third of 3 exercises that is laid out in this chapter. And the first thing it's going to ask us, were we having trouble with personal relationships? And I'm briefly and prayerfully, as best I can, want to come at this. I'm going to want to take a look at this. I don't want to get into writing a story and all that, because the ego loves that. But I want to take a look at that. And I want to take a look at those same relationships, even inside of sobriety, inside of recovery. The first relationship I'm going to look at, and I'm talking about David G., is I'm going to look at God. The next one I'm going to look at is my family. I'm going to look at my coworkers. I'm going to look at my brothers and sisters in recovery, my family, including my other half, my better half, however you want to state that. I want to look at all of those personal relationships, and I want to see where I'm having trouble in those areas. Not where they've caused me trouble, but where I have had trouble. Look at the second one. We couldn't control our emotional natures. That's even in sobriety recovery. Am I a basket case? Am I just tearful all the time? Am I just a raging idiot? Which I have been, for sure. Am I able to control that desire to control somebody else's life, or to really lay down the law how it's going to be if you want to be around me, on and on and on? Look at this one. We were a prey. Now, I always thought I was the predator. That's what I've been told, especially with the addiction I had with lust. But not according to this. I'm the prey. And if I'm the prey, who's the predator? We're going to find out that that's self. And we're going to see how that has taken us almost to death. So we were a prey to misery and depression. I want to look at why and how. I couldn't make a living. I was making over 6 figures a year. I thought that's not true. But if I really stopped and looked, that if I wasn't feeding my disease, if I wasn't supporting my habits, if I wasn't doing this, could I have done better with my job? Could I have given more? Could I have made it better? It says we had a feeling of uselessness. Oh my God. I can remember feeling like the lowest piece of crap that ever walked. And then on the other hand, I felt like the greatest man that ever lived at the time. It's insane how self will take these ideas and twist them back and forth and up and down, depending on where you're at that day. We're full of fear. We're unhappy. And we can't seem to be of real, keyword there, real help to other people. It was not a basic solution to these bedevilments. More important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flight. Of course it was. Now, when I was taken through this work, and it is not in this book, but my sponsor told me, I want you to look at this 2 different ways. I want you to look at what we've read here just now. He said, then I want you to take a look at what would this look like as a recovered man? What would you like for this to look at? So I've asked my friend Ashley to put another template on the screen. Now, this does not come out of this book, but this is my experience. And if I want to take a look at this, I'm going to look at how I was having trouble with personal relationships. Very simply, I lie, I cheat to get what I want. That pretty much covers it. What would I like that to look like as a recovered man? I want to seek to give rather than to get. That's come true in my life. I wouldn't be here tonight if that wasn't the truth. Look at emotional natures. I try to numb loneliness. Anybody ever do that with anything other than drugs or alcohol? Try to do it with food. Try to do it with ideas of meeting. I try to control my emotional nature by doing a lot of that. What would that look like? I would ask and I would seek for God to remove that. How was I prey to misery? I can't say no to the voices in my head. Anybody else relate to that? What I want that to look like as a recovered man. I want to ask others for help today. That's something that's very hard for me. Praying misery to depression. I lust after something I don't have. I want what I don't have, and I just seek to get it however I can. Be thankful to God for what I do have today. Now, these is just short. I mean, as come at these in prayer, you will be able to see something in your own experience that will be much different, I'm sure. How am I unable to make a living? I take time away to do what I want. As a recovered man, I like to put others' needs above my own. And you can see the rest. I don't need to continue reading on. But this is the bedevilment exercise, and it is a very important one. So when me or anyone that I have worked with takes someone through this work, we most definitely stop and take a look at the bedevilments before moving on. So it says, when we saw others solve their problems, not just heard about it, I've witnessed it. I've watched it inside of the fellowship. When we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, not all this complicated stuff that I had, of how I was going to have to rely, what I was going to have to do to meet these conditions. None of that. A simple reliance. Think about a child. I had my young grandson here last week, and he's not quite 2 years old yet. And man, he's curious about everything. And it's almost like a simple reliance. He just relies upon his mother and others to take care of him. That's kind of how I want to be with God, how I want to be with the spirit of the universe. I don't want a bunch of confusion there. We had to stop doubting the power of God. It doesn't say we had to stop doubting God. I have to stop doubting the power of God, because our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. And I didn't know for a long time those are 2 different ideas. My idea of God and the God idea are 2 different ideas. until I have this experience. The Wright brothers' almost childish faith that they could build a machine which would fly was the mainspring of their accomplishment. Their childish faith. That was the mainspring of it. Without that faith, nothing could have happened. So we agnostics and atheists were sticking, key word here, sticking to the idea that self-sufficiency, small s, would solve our problem. When others showed us that God's sufficiency worked with them inside the fellowship, through recovery, you hear certain people speak at meetings, you can hear that language of the heart. We just know that they know. And I see because they show that in the way that they carry themselves. It says, we begin to feel like those who had insisted that the Wrights would never fly. Couldn't have been true, huh? But yes, it is. Logic is great stuff. We liked it. We still like it. It's not by chance we were, look at this, given the power to reason. We were given that. That's a gift. It's like, oh, you don't have the power to do that. Yeah, I do. Yes, I do. Now, what I do with that, once I've had that experience, that's one thing. But don't tell me that I don't have the power because I do. I was given that. And it tells me that more than one time in this book. But we're given the power to reason. Examine the evidence of our senses. Anybody do regular 10 steps on here? I guarantee you're going to examine the evidence of your senses if you do that on a regular basis. And to draw a conclusion, that's one of man's magnificent attributes. That just is. That's a beautiful thing that we're able to do that as human beings. We agnostically inclined would not feel, keyword, satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to a reasonable approach and interpretation. Hence, we are at pains to tell why we think our present faith is reasonable and why we think it more sane and logical to believe than not to believe. And when my thinking are along those lines, then I'm beginning to be restored to sanity. When we say our former key word here, thinking, was soft and mushy, we threw up our hands in doubt and said, we don't know. My sponsor told me there's only 3 words that I want to hear come out of your mouth ever. I don't know. He said, why won't you say those words? I said, I don't know. And he said, fine. But as long as I know something, you can't convince me of anything different. It's when I don't know that I'm ready for a new experience. So the book says, when we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis. And look how important that is. I've heard it said in many circles, I was born an alcoholic. I was born a sex addict. The day that I come out, I was a sex addict. My book doesn't say that. It says when we became, keywords, we became alcoholics. So for me, I go by what my book says, and it doesn't say I was born that way. It says I became that way. Why? Because I was crushed by a self-imposed crisis. Now, I would think that I imposed that crisis upon myself, and I was crushed as a result of this and that. And no, that's the imposition of self. It's a crisis. Now, my beliefs began to dominate me when I was very little because I was abused, because I was very afraid. I started getting certain ideas. People won't treat me this way again ever. If they do, I'll kill them. I'll do this. All of these beliefs started flooding in on me. I started being imposed by self with this crisis. And when that happened, I had no way to really comprehend or accept those feelings. I didn't know how to do that. So I drank, and that seemed to take it away. And then after a while, that stopped working. So I drugged, and that took it away for a long time. And so now I've got an addiction on top of the self-imposed crisis. And I became an alcoholic, and I became a sex addict, and I became a drug addict, and I became all of these things because of the imposition of self. We cannot postpone or evade. I can't run 14 miles down the road and wait a week or two and just kind of evade this deal. I can't do that because wherever I go, there's self, my beliefs and concepts and ideas, they're there. I can't postpone this. I can't put this off for a couple of days. I just can't. And I've tried. We all have. I think we stand at a turning point right here, because we're going to fearlessly face the proposition that God is either everything or else he is nothing. He either is or he isn't. What's our choice to be? So if I ask you the same way it was asked me, what's your choice to be, David? I'll say, okay, God is everything. It seemed like he said, how long has it been that way? And I said, well, ever since I took the second step and made this choice. He said, I've seen you in a lot of misery since then, trying to figure things out on your own. I've seen you squirming around, running to a lot of meetings and doing a lot of things, and that hadn't been working out for you too well. You've still been having a whole lot of trouble. He said, what was God to you that day? And man, that hit me in the gut like an iron fist. Because you see, this choice is not a one and done. It's a daily. What is my choice? Is God everything or else he's nothing? On the days that ego and self are running the show, the power of God is not there. God is nothing. He is absolutely nothing. And that killed me to have to say that and take a look at that and admit that that was true. But it was true. And it has been true. He either is or he isn't. What's that choice to be? I don't think there really is a choice. But, I know there's definitely not one whether I would drink today or not. I'm over that now for sure. Because if that choice is left up to me, at some point, I'm going to pick up the old power. I just am. We do have a choice, and it's here. It's not there. So arrived at this point, we're squarely confronted with the question of faith. Now, we're going to squarely confront this question because I've seen this in all different ways. I've looked at it the God way. I've looked at it all these other ways, but I've never looked at it as self. That I have put my faith in self. It says we couldn't duck the issue. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason. Now look at the word reason has a capital R. We're talking about self here. We're talking about ideas. We're talking about concepts and beliefs. Reason. The bridge of reason toward the desired shore of faith. That's almost like that spiritual experience. That's like what's going to free me. That's going to liberate me. I'm going to be on the shore. I'm going to live the happy ever after. All of this stuff is wonderful. I can see it in the distance. It says the outline and the promise of the new land had brought luxury to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. Now, this is going to talk about when we come to the fellowship of whatever fellowship you come to. For me, in the beginning, it was Alcoholics Anonymous. That was the new land. It had brought luster to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. It's almost like I come in with that surrender flag, that white flag, that flagging spirits. I'm done. I'm finished. Please help. Please help. What happened when I came to the fellowship? The same thing this next sentence says. Friendly hands stretched out in welcome. Isn't that what happened to most of us? People stuck out their hand. Now, if you were never been to an in-person meeting, I promise you there's going to be a whole lot of handshaking and a whole lot of hugging and a whole lot of people welcoming you there. That's just how it is. And we were grateful that reason with a capital R, our mind, the self, had brought us so far, but, and that changes the whole paragraph, that one word. Somehow I can't quite step ashore. I can't come all the way in, and I can't set all the way down. I can come in and I can do what you asked me to do by coming to meetings, helping clean up the room, do whatever I need to do. But you're going to ask me to start looking into some things in my past that I've buried deep. You're going to ask me when I get to the third column of inventory to look at what I do or what did I do every time pride or anything like that is affected. I'm going to start looking at things that uncover things emotionally inside of me that I've buried deep, and I don't ever want to look at that stuff again. And all of a sudden that starts coming out, and I can't step all the way in. I can't step all the way ashore. I can come some of the way in, but I can't come all the way in, and I can't sit all the way down. And reason is going to drag me back out the door like a wolf would a dying carcass. And it's just insane. Perhaps we've been leaning too heavily on reason. I'm afraid if I look into that stuff, if I tell that to somebody, my God, they're going to tell the police. I'm going to be taken to jail. I mean, I'm going to be exposed. My family's going to find out. I'm going to lose my marriage. Oh my God, and all of these voices start coming in, and this is reason with a capital R, and it starts reasoning with me, and it starts telling me, they don't understand you, David. They didn't been through what you've been through. None of them have been to jail the way you've been to jail. They didn't watch a man die. They didn't do this, and I start listening to this more than I keep listening to you. And I start leaning too heavily on reasoning that last mile. And I don't want to lose my support because I'm going to fall. And I don't know where I'm going to land. And everybody's telling me, David, you're going to land safe. I promise you, come in, sit down, you're going to land safe. And I don't believe that. And I'm not going to do that. And so I don't. So what happened? It says that's natural. But let us think a little more closely. So I want to think more close about this now that I'm coming through this. Keywords right here. These 3 words they're life-changing without knowing it. I don't even know that self is doing this to me. I'm unconscious to that. And if I do get a little bit of a clue about it, I mean, it's going to go away just as quick as it came. So I don't know this is happening. But it says without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith. We're not talking about faith in God. We're talking about faith in self. Had I not been brought to where I stood the day I showed up in this fellowship, begging and dying by a certain kind of faith, the faith that I'd put in my own thinking, my own reasoning, my own belief system, it had brought me to where I stood that day, and I didn't even know it. I had no idea. The book said, for did not we believe in our own reasoning? Look at the little r now. We got eyes on it now. We can see it. That changes. And that's as soon as we become aware. Did we not have confidence in our ability? Keywords here. To think. Look at this. What was that but a sort of faith? And I have to tell you, at this point in the work, I had to close the book. That scared the hell out of me. I have been living by this. I have put my faith into this. I have prayed to this, and I don't even know it. And my life is going down the crap or inside of sobriety and recovery, and I'm doing things that I shouldn't be doing, and I'm miserable and I'm hurting, and I try to tell somebody, but I can't tell the whole truth, and I get on my knees and I say, God, help me, please help me, please show me, please show me. And it says, okay, go make more meetings, read more books, do this, do that, and it runs me in all these different directions, and here I am again, right back at the same place. My thinking, my ability to think has become a sort of faith to me. Yes, I have been faithful, objectively faithful, miserably, in other words, faithful to the God of reason. That's powerful. Capital R. That has become my God, and I don't even know it. That's why my life is not getting any better. I go through the steps and I fall back. I take 4 and fall back 3, and I'm at 1 over and over and over and over. And that's happened every time. And I come in and I'll try something new. And it happens again and again and again. So in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved the entire time. It's not that I didn't have faith. I've always had faith. Everybody has. Which way has that faith been channeled? What's that look like in your life today? Where are we at in our recovery? Is it blossoming? Are we helping other people? Are we fruitful? Are we living a life of freedom? Am I not scared of God today in the way that I was always scared of God? What's my faith look like? Wow. It's almost too much to handle whenever I start reading it in that way. Look at this. We found too that we've been worshipers. Oh my God. That's definitely life-changing. We have been worshipers. What a state of mental goose flesh that used to bring on. But look at these questions. Have we not variously worshiped people? Husbands, wives, bosses, spiritual gurus. In some ways, I've worshiped these people. Sentiment. What about things? Money? What about self? Then with a better motive, have we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower? There's a question that I always ask the people that I take through this part of the book. I'll say you have the ocean and you have waves. You tell me, are the waves a part of the ocean or are they not? Are they separate from that? And when I was asked that question, obviously I thought the waves was separate from the ocean. But I can promise you that they're not. They're the same. They're water. The same as now they come crashing into the shoreline, kind of like we do in our own lives from time to time. But they are most definitely not apart from. They are a part of. And when I began to see this in my relationship with the Creator, everything began to change for me. Who of us had not loved something or somebody? Of course we did. Look at these powerful words. How much did these keywords here, feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing we saw at last. Were not these things the tissue out of which our lives were constructed? That's how my life has been constructed. It's been constructed out of all of my thoughts and feelings and all of this stuff about this stuff. And it has guided my life. And I've put faith into that. And it's served me for a while, but it's turned on me now. And I can't get any relief, and I can't understand why. And look at that next sentence. Did not these feelings, keywords, after all, determine the course of our existence? Of course they did, because I put my faith into them. How could they not? And I find out that I've been serving the wrong God the entire time. Wow. You talk about a hit in the gut. That was a hit in the gut. So it's impossible to say that we have no capacity for faith or love or worship, because in one form or another, we've been living by faith and little else. It's just been channeled in the wrong direction. It's in the wrong place. And my life is crap because of it. I want freedom. And even if my life isn't total crap, I'm still feeling empty. I still can't quite seem completely free. And so imagine life without faith, where nothing left but pure reason. It wouldn't be life. But we believed in life. Of course we did. We could not prove life in the sense that you can prove a straightest line is the shortest distance between 2 points. Yet there it was. Could we still say that the whole thing was nothing but a mass of electrons created out of nothing, meaning nothing, and whirling into a destiny of nothingness? Of course we couldn't. The electrons themselves seem more intelligent than that, at least so the chemist said. So hence we saw that reason isn't everything. Of course it isn't. There's no way it can be. Neither is reason as most of us use it. And I think this is the key here. I'm entirely dependable upon it, and I don't even really know that's happening, though it emanate from our best minds. What about people who prove that man can never fly? They were wrong. Could I have been wrong? Yet we've been seeing another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world. People who rose above their problems. They say God made these things possible, and we only smiled. We had seen this release, but we like to tell ourselves that it wasn't so. I love that, compared to what the old saying that everybody knows, what lies behind me and what is before me is nothing compared to what lies within me. And I come to find that out in this process. And so our time is up, and we'll just finish it off next week. But very, very important reading here for anybody that is going through the work, or anybody that's thinking about going through the work, or anybody that's already been through the work. I mean, this is just a deeper way to take a look at those things. And for me, this is life-changing, because we're really, really going to start hammering in on self now. We're going to start looking at how it sets it up, how it sets us up for defeat even inside of recovery, how it's made me believe and worship it, how I've had faith in it over and over and over. And wow, what does that look like for me in my life? So very grateful to be here and get to share tonight. Dennis, Ashley, thank you for your service, and thank you everybody for coming out. I'm glad to be here.
This concludes David's share on tonight's chapter, but we encourage you to keep listening as he answers questions from the audience and shares additional experience, strength, and hope.
Thanks, David. I know you've done it before, but would you mind repeating? You said there's 3 questions up to, or the third question being the bedevilment ones. What were the previous 2 that you ask people when you take them through this chapter?
Yes, ma'am. 3 exercises, not 3 questions. First one being on page 46, and it's a reflection exercise. And it talks toward the end of that first, I guess, full paragraph there. When enchanted by a starlit night, we found ourselves thinking, who then made all of this? That's the first. The second one is there at the top of 47, and that's called the spiritual terms exercise. And we do have a template for that you're able to get a hold of. But it starts there after about the third sentence where it says, do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourselves what these mean to you. And that's an exercise. And then, of course, the third one being the bedevilment, which is there on page 52. So
thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You know, when I first came into this program, I saw this We Agnostics chapter, and I did not really believe that it was something I needed. I thought, well, I have a very strong faith tradition. I'm not an atheist or I'm not an agnostic, so I don't really need it. But as I went through the work with David through here, and he showed me what it was actually saying, you know, the power of reason, small r, but we get down here to where it starts talking about the bridge of reason with a capital R. That's what I'm relying upon. And I used to say, well, my faith is in God. But when I watched my actions, what was I relying upon? And I could see very clearly that I was relying upon self's will. I was afraid to completely abandon myself to God completely because I didn't trust God at that moment. Although in my mind, I believed that, but my actions and what I'm really relying upon lets me know if I get into fear today, and if I don't surrender that immediately, and I'm starting to control and manage an outcome from that fear, I'm back in the God of reason. And I really like what it says, but somehow we couldn't quite step to shore. And when I take sponsees through this, even guys that have a very strong faith tradition will come to their own conclusion that, man, I'm just afraid. It doesn't introduce me to a higher power. It introduced me to the power that I had been relying upon all the time. And that's exactly why I need this program, so that I can step into the sunlight of spirit and really start relying upon God. And I'll pass.
I really appreciate the study tonight. And while it was going on, I was thinking to myself that, you know, I have problems with people, and when somebody's doing me wrong, a self takes over. And how do I overcome that self taking over and doing wrong things to other people in retaliation to what they have done to me? It's a big difficulty I've had.
Thank you, Ralph. Man, it's good to hear from you tonight, brother. I'll definitely be in touch with you tomorrow as well. But for me, the first thing, I had to become aware of that, and it sounds like you already have. And the book says that awareness is the essence of an experience that's already beginning to happen, whether I know it or not. I think the other thing that is so important for me in that, and I fall short of that quite often myself, not as much anymore as I did, but it hadn't been all that long ago, is that I must do the 5 simple things that's outlined on page 84 of this book. And if I don't do that, which is in the 10th step, pretty consistently, then I seem to fall back asleep to those thoughts, and they begin to roll down the hill like a snowball, and they just get bigger and bigger and bigger until I take the action and I blow up, and I say things that I wish I hadn't said, and I do things that I wish I hadn't done. And then now I've got to go back and make amends and try to start all over again. So really, I don't know if we can completely ever not step into that trap, but there is a way to stay out of it 90% of the time or so. That's been my, I think if I don't turn to the spirit of the universe that I've come to rely upon today, then I'm definitely going to turn to the power of reason, and I'm going to do what it tells me to do. And so that's been my experience with that. And a lot of times it's even after that I look back and think, oh my God, self got me again. I wasn't even aware of it. I wasn't even aware that was happening, because I was quite sure I was right and they was wrong, and they needed a good butt chewing. And, I was more than happy to give it to them. So yeah, I think that messengers, which are these defects, or hitchhikers, as the Native Americans call them, fear, resentment, all this stuff, they will show up and give us opportunity to practice this. So no worries, my friend. They will be back, and we'll have another chance to practice. So it's always good to hear from everybody.